In this design deep dive, I'm going to be breaking down one of the best designed aspects of one of the best designed games that's come out this year, the characters in Ball Pit. Firstly, I will talk through each character and what they do and the particular design highlights or negatives for those design decisions. And then I will be ranking them from 15 to 1 in terms of what I believe is the best designed character in Ball Pit. I hope you enjoy. Starting off with the warrior. The ball that he uses is bleed and he does not have any active or passive abilities. Now this is the default character that is of course a great introduction to the game. It is a good base to compare other characters against. Its underwhelming design isn't apparent at first, which is important, but soon players will be introduced to more and more interesting characters which would likely result in the warrior being forgotten about, which isn't necessarily a bad thing and arguably a necessary consequence of such a large and diverse roster. The itchy finger. The ball that he uses is fire, and his passive abilities are scattered aim, 2x fire rate, constantly launches balls if available, and no speed reduction when firing. The itchy finger is the second character you unlock, with the main difference being between him and the warrior is that he has scattered aim but can shoot twice as fast. For me it's just simply a net positive design change, as aiming accurately is important but not for the levels that this character gets introduced in. It is really smart for the design change to be pretty much just the increased fire rate, as it's something which the player can really value immediately, more so now than in any other part of the game. It's also a subtle but great decision to give him scattered aim, as it negates just standing right next to enemies and shooting so quickly that it's not really a challenge. So scattered aim means balls will bounce away from the character and avoid this happening. The Repentant has a ball type of freeze, and its active and passive abilities are that balls deal an additional 5% damage each time they bounce, and when balls hit the back wall they gain pass through and return to the player. Now the Repentant was my GOAT for the majority of the first half of the game for a few reasons. Firstly, you can really feel that damage buff over time with the 5%, but mainly the Repentant is incredibly designed as it gives the player the first real opportunity to feel smart. At this point in the game when the player gets Repentant, they most certainly come across balls like Ghost or Wind, and most likely the Ethereal perk as well. All of these give the balls pass through, but create an issue where balls just take forever to return to the player, especially with the perk Ethereal, which disables pass through once it hits the back wall. The player would have definitely felt this issue and wished for a resolution, only then to be granted it via the Repentant, but just with a bit of thinking required on their end. This for me, and I'm sure for many others as well, was the hook they needed to really start dissecting the game and see what other problems could be solved with new characters and new builds. Then we have the Embedded, who has a ball type of poison, and its active and passive ability is balls always pierce enemies until they hit a wall. Speaking of dealing with piercing shots, this is Embedded's bread and butter. This is the first character where the player is really encouraged to truly think about the angles of their shots to get the most out of it. And honestly, I think this character might be underrated and underappreciated for just how well it does that. Due to the trigger for losing pass through being hitting a wall, the player is constantly thinking about how they can get balls to become solid at the right time. Whether that's just wedging them between a wall and a big enemy, or getting them to become solid right in the middle of a group. Very subtle design and great execution. This character is also a great skill check and more of a knowledge check for the player if they haven't really understood the consequence of pass through yet. For example, if they hadn't come across the Ethereal perk at this point. This is because if the player isn't clever with their aiming, they will soon have all of their balls stuck behind enemies at the top of the field with no way to get them back. Next we have the Coditator, a ball type of laser vertical, and the passive ability being that they pick all the upgrades themselves. This is the first of a string of wacky characters we're going to uncover. Now there is no change to the way the player plays minute to minute. They will still be shooting how they would, but they just have no say in what upgrades they get. This is a design choice which is tricky to properly assess, as there are positives and negatives. The positives are twofold. They allow the player a character to choose to lighten cognitive load if needed. And secondly, the AI actually does a good job at showing the player potential evolutions of balls they have yet to come across. However, the negative is just simply the design choice of removing a choice. Some players will like it and some players won't, but even players that don't like it, they might actually find that the character is better at choosing than them, and because of this then uses them to get through runs, essentially optimizing the fun out of the experience. Of course this is completely on the player, but there is always something to consider when giving the player tools to potentially have more victories but at the cost of engagement. Next we have the Shade, with a ball type of dark and abilities of shooting balls from the back instead of the front, with a 10% increase in and crit chance. The shade is a really interesting one. At first they just seem straight up terrible. This is due to a few reasons. The first being what I've mentioned a few times now, because they shoot from the back, it's easy for balls to get stuck behind enemies with a long wait time for them to get back to you, which means that if there are a few stray enemies marching towards you, there is no real way to deal with them. The other major reason relates to this, which is that you can't beat bosses at the beginning. It's so difficult to do so, because almost all mini-bosses spawn enemies behind them pretty rapidly. So whilst your balls are bouncing off rapidly against the enemies behind the boss is just walking towards you and will just start hitting you. In saying this, once you level up the shade enough and know your perks to get the best out of hitting enemies from the back, then they become really, really good and actually melt mini-bosses before reinforcements even show up. This is the first character you will come across where you really feel like you need to grind a bit to get the most out of them. And with that, there isn't too much to suggest to improve their first time experience without then breaking the experience as they progress. You could suggest that balls return after a lessened number of bounces, or that the shade gets balls returned to them once they hit the back of the stage, like the Repentant. Both of which I think just become too strong as you progress. It's definitely an interesting discussion and exercise to consider. Next we have the Empty Nester, with a ball type of ghost, and abilities being no baby balls at all, but shoots multiple instances of just one equipped special ball. The Empty Nester is the first character where I really felt like the character was designed to be a challenge to use. They have no baby balls, which just massively reduces DPS output right off the bat and takes a lot of perks off the table, which are really useful to have. The question I have really is whether or not the passive of shooting multiple of just one equipped ball is special enough. From what I can tell, multiple almost just means two. I mean, sometimes this can be three, and I think I've seen four once or twice, but it's just one of the special balls you have in your arsenal. There is of course an upside to having doubled the amount of a particular special ball, but with no way to control it, it's just really hard to get consistent value from it. It would be worth thinking about whether it would have been too detrimental to the experience to increase the number to all equipped special balls, and maybe then reduce the character's base damage. It's interesting to say the least, but even now going through the New Game Plus, it's one of the hardest characters to utilize to their fullest potential. Next up we have the Shieldbearer. His abilities are holding a large shield that bounces balls off it, and every time that ball bounces it increases the damage of that ball by 100%, so doubles the damage, and all gems slash fusions and drops come to you automatically. Now I will be the biggest defender of Shieldbearer. I'm not even sure he really needs defending, but I think it's because I didn't really like him at first, and I think that many people as well wouldn't have really liked him at first. But it's safe to say that he's probably one of the characters with the highest skill ceiling, which means that of course you're going to be entering at the floor level when you first play him, and because that distance is so far, unlike the rest of the characters, it's gonna feel bad. The way he's presented and the way you are told about his abilities, you're almost guided to try and get as many bounces off the shield as possible. At least for me, that led to me just standing in front of enemies as close as possible and try and build up as many bounces as possible, which made me frustrated when I didn't get AoE attacks like the lasers to deal with the rest of the row. Turns out you just actually need to get good at hitting balls back, which are coming from any possible direction, which is where the skill ceiling comes in. It's important to find those angles and get balls into high impact areas, but then to deal with the angles of the balls that come back to you to get the most out of that 100% damage buff. He really is one of the most interesting design characters in the game, and it's with just such a simple mechanic as well. It's great design. Then we have the Spendthrift, whose only ability is to shoot balls at the same time in a wide arc. Now I'd say this character is probably one of the more disappointing characters for me personally. His main gimmick is that he shoots balls in a wide arc, which just makes it a bit more annoying to shoot things, and his DPS is inconsistent. What the passive ability means when it says shoot balls at the same time just means that he waits for one special ball to return to him, and then he fires that special ball as well as any baby balls he's collected. Now there is one wrinkle here and one subtlety which is interesting, which is it adds an extra layer of decision making each run when you are choosing what to acquire and when. Because you need special balls to fire, you want to get more of them. It also means that when you fuse or evolve, you're effectively limiting your DPS briefly. But on the other hand, with special balls like the Cell, where it can split into many, it actually increases that special ball's value, as it means you can increase your DPS. All of this though, for me, just doesn't really make up for the hit to game feel that the character takes. It's not bad design at all, it's just I don't see the character as being of a net positive as other characters to the experience. Next up we have the Juggler with a ball type of lightning, and his ability is that he lobs balls at a target location. Now the Juggler is a tricky one. Firstly, the design is insanely cool. I just want to say that immediately. The one change being that you lob balls where your target reticle is just genius design. There are a few reasons why it's so good. Firstly, it gives the player way more interesting strategies. Do you lob the ball into a group, into the side of a wall, just to target one particular enemy that's causing you trouble, or do you send balls straight to the back of the stage, just to name a few? Secondly though, it actually makes use of the reticle in a meaningful way. Up until this point, and continuing when you're not using this character, players aren't really paying much attention to the actual reticle, but instead to the dotted line visualizing the angles of the balls you're shooting. So making more use out of something which is just constantly there in the game anyway is always great design. The only negative is really just all the positives listed. It makes the character way too easy to use. There isn't much you can do wrong, even from level 1, to lose in any particular level, just because of the fact that the character is the answer to almost every problem the game throws your way. The first port of call to nerf for balancing reasons would probably be the DPS of the character, but also the character is just incredibly fun as is, and there is always a question of whether just having an OP character in a game like this is even a bad thing. Now, I don't know how to say this character's name, the Flagellant, I'll call him the Flagellant. His ball type is the egg sack, and his ability is that balls bounce off the bottom of the stage instead of returning to the player. Now, this passive on the surface isn't really the most interesting, and nor is the character really. The design of this character is all about just how to get the most out of your balls whilst they're on the field, as your DPS is significantly lower with this character. The reason why it's lower is because one of the triggers for replenishing your balls is taken away, which is when they hit the back of the stage. Because of the passive ability of this character, when balls do hit the back of the stage, they just keep going. So instead, the focus on the player building throughout the run how to make those balls more, in particular the baby balls, the most potent. Now, it's a nice little change to strategy, and like I said, on the surface it isn't super interesting, but I think the design is solid, and he is a good addition to the roster. The Tactician, his ball type is iron, and his ability is that battles straight up become turn-based. Right, so this is maybe the hardest character in the entire game to talk about for me. His passive, which is that he turns the entire game into a turn-based game, is truly awe-inspiring creativity. Legit, when I unlocked the character, I just didn't believe that it was going to be possible when I read the description. But I was wrong, and it is. And for the first couple of runs, it's really interesting. I think one thing that the character does really well is he kind of helps you get better at landing shots, as you get to see the cause and effect of your aim placement without any distractions. However, and this is a big however, I do genuinely think he is bad for the game. The reason for this is he's just impossible to lose with, because it's almost impossible to get hit if you're paying attention. When I unlocked him, I did a quick run of the first level to test him out, like I do with every character, and then quickly jumped to level 6 and then level 7, with no problems whatsoever. I didn't even get hit once. This, alongside the Matchmaker building allowing you to turn almost any other character in the game into a turn-based character as well, makes it really difficult to not just answer any problem you come across, such as a failed run, with okay, I'll just pair them with a Tactician. Of course, like I've said before, this is entirely in the player's hands, and they are in control of their own experience. But with such an enticing offer, I even caught myself sucking the fun out of progressing towards the end of the game because I was just pairing each character up with a Tactician to get through it. Thankfully, I did snap out of this for the final level, and I was glad I didn't use it to get the first 8 characters done. Next up we have the Radical, with a ball type of wind, and the ability being he just plays the game for you. So, the Radical. I think he's just a really cool addition to the game. The technical achievement of getting a fully functioning AI to play the game for you is a feat within itself, especially with so many things to consider in the minute-to-minute gameplay. The reason why I'm not hard on the Radical when it comes to potentially taking the fun out of the experience like I am with a Tactician is simply because the AI just isn't actually that good. It's not going to be a character which you are going to use in order to progress through the game. You can find that you can get through the first few levels pretty well, but to actually get to the end of the game it requires a lot of grinding and also just a lot of luck. Thankfully, that's what the character's good at. Having a character like this in a game which is already drip feeding a lot of idle game mechanics just means that players have one less reason to turn the game off, as they can just leave it running whilst on a work call or even whilst playing another game, which by definition is great design. Next we have the Makeshift Sisyphus. With a ball type of Earthquake, his abilities are balls no longer deal direct damage but AoE damage, and AoE damage and status effect damage is increased by 4 times, and he has no baby balls. So just to break down what his passives actually mean, because it confused me at first. Number 1, no baby balls, the same as the Empty Nester. But with the benefit of AoE damage such as Earthquake and status effect damage such as Bleed, doing 4 times more damage. Despite the clearly substantially better upside to this guy over the Empty Nester, for me it's still the same design issue of lack of balls to shoot equaling a less fun experience. There's less opportunities to aim and fire in particular areas and to feel good about making a good shot. And yet the overall damage done is similar, especially if you plan correctly, but the game feel just takes a massive hit for sure. Speaking of planning correctly, the negative to the positive of the Makeshift Sisyphus has over the Empty Nester is that you are well and truly pigeonholed into the type of build you want to make. I think more so than with any other character in the roster. Now this isn't inherently bad, but with the way the game is built around decisions, it does make a lot of choices way more straightforward. If there's a ball that does AoE or status effect damage, you'll just pick it. On the other hand, it does make the player have to think a few turns ahead, as they might pick up a special ball which doesn't have any AoE or status damage, but will do after they've been evolved, for example. Next up we have the Cohabitants, who are ball type of Broodmother. The Cohabitants are such a weird character, or should I say characters to talk about. There's 2 of them and they both fire balls but in opposite directions at the cost of 50% damage reduction. On the surface this evens out their DPS, but they have an even better benefit compared to someone like the Empty Nester of shooting double of each ball, including special balls, each time they come back to them. So you get double value from each special ball, which more than makes up for the damage reduction. Their main negative is also shared with another character though, the Shade this time. Because their aiming is so weird and the damage reduction needs to be dealt with in runs and through meta progression over time, it's really difficult to get a good run going early on with them, forcing the player to feel the need to grind to get the same value as other characters. For this reason, they're in a very similar place to the Shade in my eyes in terms of design. Maybe a possible change to the way they work could be to double every ball apart from the special balls, but keeping the damage the same, meaning no damage reduction. This means that the player will just have to worry about the aiming. But if they do meet that skill check of aiming, then they are a similar character to the Itchy Finger, which just shoots balls faster. And finally, we have the Physicist. So the Physicist special ball is light, and his ability is that the back wall pulls balls towards it like it has gravity. The Physicist is a great entry to the roster, 100%. Just looking at him by himself, the addition of an alternative aim path that also changes after each bounce opens up so many fresh ways to play for the player, which is great. Just one change and already there is so many meaningful consequences to consider. Now I'm going to go into detail later, of course, about the Matchmaker, but I have mentioned it once or twice already. But the fact that almost any character can then also be granted this new way to aim is really cool. The only real negatives are the fact that the pass-through abilities become actually just pointless, as soon as the balls reach the end of the stage, they end up back in your pocket to be fired again. Now that I think is just a necessary consequence of the design and shouldn't really have impacted implementation of it, and what a great way to end off the character breakdown. So before we go into the ranking, I'm just going to go over 4 of what I think are the most interesting pairs for the Matchmaker. Now if you don't know what the Matchmaker is essentially a building which once you build it will allow you to take 2 characters at once into any run, combining their abilities. First off, we have the Juggler and the Shade. The Shade's greatest weakness is balls getting trapped at the back of the stage, because again they shoot from the back of the stage, but because Juggler allows you to lob balls, that fixes the issue. Additionally, the Juggler also lightens the cognitive load on aiming, as aiming isn't inversed, but the player's perception is definitely off to start with the Shade. So just having to worry about where the reticle is rather than the angles is really beneficial for players who are struggling with the Shade's aiming. The Juggler is just a great antidote to the Shade, but it's definitely not mutually beneficial. However, the Matchmaker isn't always about getting the best out of both characters, but more so using one character to get the best out of the other, which is completely valid design. Next up we have the Flagellant, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong again, and the Itchy Finger. Now this is just a surefire combo to become Bullet Hell incarnate. Due to Itchy Finger's 2 times DPS and launch speed alongside Flagellant's keeping balls on the field for longer, it just means that you have a lot more balls on the field constantly, and if you build around it, it can be difficult to see the floor from the balls. It feels like these 2 were sort of made for each other. Then we have the Empty Nester and the Makeshift Sisyphus. Despite these being, in my opinion, on the low end of great game design, the option to combine them together is probably the best example, or close to the best example, of getting the best out of each character. The Empty Nester duplicates one special ball. The Makeshift Sisyphus makes sure all AoE and status effect damage is ×4, so both characters benefit. One benefits for slightly increased DPS and the other for massively increased base damage. Now of course one negative for this pair is that the Empty Nester's default special ball is the Ghost Ball, and it will literally do nothing at first because it's not AoE or status effect. However, if you beeline for a fusion with the Ghost Ball and the Earthquake Ball, then the damage output from that is truly insane, so potentially worth it, and also a nice extra layer for the design. And then finally we have the Repentant and the Embedded. Another great example of two characters getting the most out of each other, and outside the broken combos like any character with the Juggler or the Tactician, this in my opinion is the best combination of characters. The Embedded has passed through on balls until they hit a wall, and the Repentant returns balls to the player once it hits the back of the stage and has a 5% damage increase per bounce. The negation of balls getting stuck at the back of the stage is huge, like incredibly huge for the player, but the thing which is actually amazing is the 5% damage increase per bounce, because as the Embedded can lodge balls against walls and enemies, the damage buff skyrockets to insane numbers really fast. And it is also great because it requires the players to aim strategically and actually take into consideration their shots and the enemy placement. These two carried me through the game, not just because of their amazing combos, but because they're just so fun to play with. So, now we get on to ranking. And this isn't something that I've really done in a video before. I haven't really ranked characters that you can play, but I think it'll be interesting. Now, using all the context I've just given, I'm going to rank the design of each character, starting with number 15 and working up to number 1. The reason I'm not starting at number 16 is because there are two which I just couldn't separate, so they do share the same spot. Let's go. So at number 15 we have the Tactician. The Tactician, in my opinion, is an incredibly cool implementation of a concept 100%, but just not for this game. I think that when I play as him, it's just not fun, and that's because no aspect of his design improves or even really meets the core design pillars of the game. Number 14, the Empty Nester. The Empty Nester isn't great to play with because of her reduced ball output, and with that is a reduced opportunity to strategically shoot balls. The pool of passives is significantly reduced in terms of usefulness as well, and just overall doesn't really feel close to any of the characters in the game in terms of design depth. Number 13, the Makeshift Sisyphus. Despite the upside of this character basically making up for his lack of ball output because of the 4 times on AoE and status effect damage, he also just doesn't feel great to play for the same reason as number 15, the Empty Nester. Too few opportunities to land really meaningful shots, and the positive impact of the increased damage doesn't make up for it in terms of game feel. Number 12, the Spendthrift. The Spendthrift just isn't particularly interesting outside of the novelty of the wide arc shot. There is some strategy there with regards to how quick you need to get special balls in order to increase your DPS, as he only fires when he gets special balls back. But on the flip side, it isn't really something which changes up the already pre-established player behaviour. Number 11, the Radical. Now, I think that the Radical is 100% a net positive for the game. Having an idle character in a game like this adds a bunch of useful aspects to the player experience. Of course, you can have the game on whilst the Radical runs through levels and gets you resources. He can complete levels for you, which gives you bonuses. It's also helpful when matchmaking, as you can level up other characters too, which is good, especially if you're struggling with them. The only reason he is low on the list is because, by definition, he isn't fun to play because you don't play as him. Number 10, the Shade. The Shade's ability, which is to shoot from the back, really makes this character the only character in the game which requires grinding or the Matchmaker to get any serious results out of at the beginning. Because of the way enemies spawn and the way mini-boss encounters are designed, it's near impossible to win with them without leveling them up higher than you would other characters to achieve the same results. Once you get over that threshold, and coupled with upgrades to level scaling, the Shade becomes a monster and you melt fields instantly. It's just I question whether the Shade could have gotten a better start in life and maybe some dampening on how they improve later on to make them feel closer to the other characters in that regard, like in terms of progression. Also, at joint number 10, we have the Cohabitants. As I've mentioned previously in this video, their design, though on the surface very different, for me pulls at the same strings and evokes the same emotions and player experience of the Shade. They require grinding to get appropriate value, they have weird aiming, they don't have the issue that the Shade has with getting balls stuck behind enemies, but the aiming is just so bizarre. Along with the DPS hit, it takes a good while both in terms of skill and meta progression to really get much out of them. Number 9, the Warrior. The Warrior is your default character, the one you first start to learn the game with. His stats are nothing special, he has no abilities, he just has a bleed ball and that's it. However, I think that's completely fine and valid design, but something which people might not really see is just how impactful the bleed ball is for the character's design. The bleed ball is probably the best example of a ball which showcases the cascading effect of correct ball placement, status effect damage, and avenues to evolutions which really synergize in interesting ways. That decision to have for your first character alone is worth praise. Number 8, the Coditator. The Coditator's gimmick is that he picks upgrades for you. I think this is entirely a net positive design choice for 2 reasons. Firstly, he allows the player to keep playing even if their cognitive load is maxed out, as they just have to shoot balls, and all major decisions are left up to him. Secondly, he shows the player more paths to evolutions and fusions. I don't think it's an accident you get him so early on. One key reason for this is to help teach the player more ways to get more out of your special balls. Number 7, the Flagellant. The Flagellant is definitely style over substance, 100%, but that substance is so good. The ability difference between him and the rest of the characters is just that his balls bounce off the bottom of the screen. This means that balls stay on the screen longer, giving them more opportunity to pick up speed and do more damage. Coupled with passives that increase damage over time, he can really feel super rewarding to use, even if he isn't the most interesting. Number 6, the Itchy Finger. The Itchy Finger is the second character the player unlocks, and I don't think I can imagine a better, more well-suited character for this role. His increased DPS is such a basic mechanic that players will understand and immediately see as an improvement over the warrior. He works well coupled with so many other characters, but not in a broken way. He could have been pushed further to be even more interesting, but I think that could have been at the detriment to his overall design. I feel like he's in a great place as he is. Number 5, the Physicist. The Physicist is such a well-designed character. There's not a string of different stat changes or multiple smaller gimmicks. He's just a guy that makes the back wall of the stage act as a black hole, pulling balls towards it. This one effect not only makes aiming more interesting and varied, but the reaction the balls have once they've taken more than one bounce. It really opens the skill ceiling in a bunch of interesting ways for the player to get the most out of their shots. Number 4, the Juggler. The Juggler is similar to the Magician, it's just a straight up significant change to how the player shoots. The Juggler is probably the easiest character in the game to go all the way with in pretty much any run other than Tactician, but forgetting the balancing issue a bit, the amount of possibilities and potential strategies the player has at their disposal when using the Juggler is a symptom of incredibly well done design. From launching balls to the back of the stage, to chucking them in the middle of enemies, to wedging it in between an enemy and the wall, are just a few ways to get the most out of this character. Number 3, the Embedded. The ability to have pass-through balls right up until they hit the wall is one which adds so many considerations for the player. This character is so easy to lose a run on, but also so rewarding when you get it right. The enemy formations and placements are so crucial when it comes to every shot, and the calculations the player is forced to make really does make this character special amongst the roster. Number 2, the Repentant. The likely third character the player unlocks is designed perfectly to answer a lot of players' problems at that stage of the game, which is pretty much the sole reason as to why it's so high up on the list. At this point in the game, the player has most likely identified that getting balls stuck at the back of the stage, either via shot placement or different pass-through abilities like Ethereal, is such a huge problem. At this point in the game, giving the player the straight-up answer to this is really well-designed pacing and character design. On top of that, his 5% damage buff per bounce really opens doors to a lot of strategic play, and most importantly, a lot of ways to give the player positive reinforcement for that strategic play and make them start to see the possibilities when playing ball pit. And finally, we have number 1, the Shieldbearer. This guy has to be number 1 purely because of the gimmick and what that does to the skill ceiling of the character. I wouldn't be surprised if most people hated him to begin with, or maybe liked him because of the gimmick and then quickly hated him after using him. But the fact that the game is asking you to do 2 things, shoot strategically but then also have the mechanical dexterity to keep balls in play via bouncing them off the shield and get that 100% damage buff, really makes the character unlike any other in the roster. And is a great example of how you can get a lot out of a character's design without breaking the bank when it comes to systems. So there we are, I've kind of just gushed a lot about ball pit in this video, and this is a weird one because this outro isn't scripted at all. I'd kind of just wanted to talk a bit about how great this game is. I, for one, hate roguelikes. I genuinely do not like roguelikes at all. I've never enjoyed one, I never completed one, and I was really skeptical about ball pit. But if you are a game designer and you watch this channel to learn about game design and you haven't played Ball Pit yet, I 100% recommend that you check it out, because not only has it taught me about game design, but it's really showed me that games don't have to be tied down by their genre. They can widen the net, bring new people in, but really improve on the foundations the genre has already set for them. And also, this game is just so inspirational. There are a bunch of people who worked on this game, but there was one guy by the name of Kenny Sun who did the majority of the work from what I can tell, and if that isn't inspiring all on its own, then I don't know what is. But yeah, anyway, that's it for now. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please make sure to subscribe for more content like this and like the video. It helps get it shown to other people who are interested in this type of content. And yeah, I guess I'll see you in the next one. Keep on keeping on.